Hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to another exciting month here with JSCM Group. This is Madison Slater, your WatchGuard tour guide for the day. Welcome to our November 2021 update webinar. Hard to believe it's already November somehow. We've got a lot of cool stuff to talk about today and a nice demo for you. So sit back and relax over the next 30 minutes and enjoy a little bit of WatchGuard update information. Just before we get into it, about this webinar, your lines are automatically on mute. We are going to be recording this webinar, so if you need to play it back later, it will be available on our website. There is a chat window available that you can send questions to, and we will answer those at the end. All right, so our topics for this month, we're going to talk about some new Wi-Fi 6 enabled access points. We're also going to talk about some new mid-range firewalls. We talked about that last month. I just want to hit it again, make sure you're all aware of the new hardware WatchGuard has available. We'll talk about geofencing for AuthPoint that is now in beta. And then our demo today is going to be on Multi-WAN and SD-WAN implementation, making sure you've got that set correctly on your firewall. Something I try to cover every so often, just because it is something that is pretty important to making sure your firewall is working correctly. And then, of course, we'll talk about our upcoming trainings if you decide you want to actually come to class with us. All right, so before we jump into the actual content, as always, we like to talk about the firmware updates. So our latest updates for our XTM devices are 12.13 update 6. For some of our T10 and M series devices, that's going to be things like our T10, T15, T30, M200, M300. Our current release is 12.59. And then for our other T series and M series devices like our T20, T70, M400, M370, etc., those are on 12.72. Our premise here at JSCM is that we don't immediately jump to the new firmware. We have been testing these releases, haven't seen any issues. We're starting to roll this firmware out to our managed clients. So if you have not upgraded in a while, we are seeing good results with these new recent releases. So we feel like you are good to go ahead and get your firewall upgraded. Of course, before you ever do an upgrade, please make sure you take a backup of your firewall, just in case. In case something happens, there's an unforeseen issue with that firmware, you want to be able to roll back quickly. And if you're not sure how to take a backup, there's plenty of documentation out there on the WatchGuard website. If you search our WatchGuard blog, you'll see information there about it, or you can always give us a call and we'll be happy to walk you through it. It takes a couple of seconds. It's definitely not a difficult process. All right, so Wi-Fi 6 access points. Wi-Fi 6 is probably something, if you're paying attention to Wi-Fi, that you're hearing more and more about. It is just the next generation of Wi-Fi, better coverage and so forth. So having Wi-Fi 6 access points is something that we are really looking closely at. We talk about it a lot around our office. You know, when you're talking about purchasing equipment or replacing equipment, you're not purchasing or replacing for today. You're doing this for 2 years from now because that equipment has to stay in place for a while. Wi-Fi 6 is just the next piece of this. So if you are coming up for renewal on your access points, if you've been looking at something, replacing those, make sure you are getting Wi-Fi 6 APs. Now, WatchGuard has 3 different Wi-Fi 6 APs that they have available. The first is our AP 130. These are recommended for our low density environments like small offices, remote workers, meeting rooms. We've got some statistics or some details over here. So 2x2 scanning, 4 internal antenna, max data rate of 1.2 gigabits, and then it has 1 gigabit PoE port. We also have the AP 330s. So these are going to be recommended more for our medium density retail, point of sale systems, K through 12 schools, larger offices that might have a little bit more going on. So these are also going to offer our 2x2 scanning, 7 internal antenna on these, 1.2 gigabit max data rate, and then it has 2.5 gig PoE port on it. And then finally, we have our AP430CR. These are high density that are recommended for rugged or outdoor environments. So if you've got an outdoor space, maybe you're in a warehouse where you've got a lot of dust or stuff flying around in the air, that's what these are designed for. campuses, manufacturing, stadiums, hospital facilities. That's what they've designed the AP430 for. 4x4 scanning on these, 6 external antenna, max data rate of 2.4 gigabits, and our PoE Plus ports, we have 1 5 gigabit. So those are our Wi-Fi 6 enabled access points. So lots of possibility there. Again, if you're looking at upgrading, just to let you know, if you are interested in these, I don't expect any of you to be able to sit and read all of this information, but I do want you to know WatchGuard has a lot of details about these access points up on their site. I've listed the URL here, or you can do what I do, which is just go to your favorite search engine and type in WatchGuard Wi-Fi 6 access points, and you'll be able to find this information. This particular page also, if you scroll down, has information about their Wi-Fi 5 APs from a comparison standpoint. There's also just some other statistics on that page about our Wi-Fi 6 APs. So again, if that's something that you are looking at possibly upgrading your Wi-Fi environment, please make sure you're getting Wi-Fi 6 enabled access points. That's also going to give you the ability to upgrade to WPA3, which from a security standpoint is definitely the place that we are recommending people start moving to. So yeah, WatchGuard is definitely trying to keep up with what we're seeing from an industry perspective, and now they've got our Wi-Fi 6 models out. All right, mid-range hardware. Again, we covered this pretty extensively last month. I don't want to go as deep into it last month as we did. If you were not able to attend our October webinar, it is posted on our website if you want to get more of the details of the hardware. But I did want to make sure everyone is very aware there is new hardware available, new M-series devices that are honestly designed to perform better when it comes to data encryption. So one of the things that we push really heavily when we're talking our security assessments is deep packet inspection, which is allowing the firewall to unencrypt your HTTPS traffic. That, of course, takes extra processing. Now, the current M-series devices, they can handle it, but they were not necessarily designed with that optimal capability in mind. So that's what this new hardware is really trying to handle. We have our Firebox M290s. These are ideal for our small and mid-sized organizations up to 75 users. We have our Firebox M390, so that's going to be our small to mid-sized organizations up to 250 users. Just for some statistics on this one, we're seeing about 100% throughput comparison to the M370. We have our M590. This is our supporting our growing mid-sized businesses up to 500 users. Good throughput there. We do have some PoE port options that you can add on. Our Firebox M690, that's our mid-sized businesses up to 850 users. Just to show you, oops, sorry, I'm getting click happy here. Just to show you what some of the back looks like, our power adapters. This is what happens when you have too much coffee in the morning. Our M590 and 690 do have redundant AC power supplies. So if you're looking for something that's got a little bit more durability from a failover perspective, then you can get that with the PoE. All right. The other thing I wanted to bring to everyone's attention, something we've been talking about, knowing it was coming, it is finally here, AuthPoint Geofencing Beta. So with AuthPoint Geofencing, what you can do is when you're writing your authentication policies in AuthPoint, you can now attach a geofencing policy to it, basically saying, here is where these connections are allowed from, and it's done by country. So I can allow just from the United States, or maybe I'm doing business in the United States and certain countries in Europe. I can allow that by writing these policies in my AuthPoint. So this is still in beta. It is still technically being tested, but it is available if this is something that you are interested in doing. There's information out there about how to get that turned on. We will be sending out an alert when it is fully out of beta, has reached the public access without having to use a testing version of it. We're really, really trying to push geofencing, not just from an AuthPoint perspective, but also from a policy perspective. There's a lot of junk out there. There are a lot of attackers that are coming at us from all different places of the world. Of course, there's plenty that's happening here in the United States. It's really hard to block those from a geolocation standpoint because we would also block ourselves. However, these other countries, we can knock those out with these types of things. So if you are someone who likes to go ahead and jump in, the beta is available. You can go ahead and get access into that. Again, do like I do, just search WatchGuard AuthPoint geofencing beta. You'll find information about it. Or, like I said, we'll be putting out alerts once it's out of beta and we feel like it's ready for prime time. All right, demo time. Wanted to walk through Multi-WAN and SD-WAN. Now, again, this is something that we've covered plenty of times before, but it is also something that I feel is really important for you to understand, especially if you have multiple external connections. So let's do a little WatchGuard 101. Multi-WAN, what does that mean? Multi-WAN means that I have multiple external connections on my firewall. So multiple internet providers. This is becoming more and more common. The primary reason for multi-WAN is redundancy. You have one primary connection, and then you decide I want to get a backup just in case. So setting up multi-WAN on the firewall is pretty straightforward in that the first thing that we do is have to actually configure our connections. So let's say that I've got my primary connection, which is fiber, and it's a static IP. So let's just put our information in here real quick. All right, so this would be just general external interface. That's the only one that I have. But I've been able to lease a second line into my office. So to set up multi-WAN, the first thing that I have to do is just decide what interface do I want to configure this on. As long as that interface is not in use, I can use it for an external connection. So let's just put it on my Ethernet 7. I'm going to configure this as another external interface. We'll give it, let's just say that this is a basic cable internet connection, nothing fancy. I've got a static IP on it as well. All right. So as soon as you configure a second external connection, the first thing that it's going to tell you is by default, external interfaces are not monitored unless you manually add them to link monitor. Do we need to be worried about this? Absolutely. Link monitoring is very important because this is how the firewall determines if your interfaces are actually up or not. If you configure multiple external interfaces and do not configure link monitoring, you're not really getting the benefit of multiple external interfaces because your firewall doesn't know how to failover. So what we want to do first is go into our link monitor setting. Now what we like to do here is we're going to add each of our external interfaces. And by default, when you add these, you're going to see that it creates a target of the default gateway. So basically what the firewall is going to do is it's going to send a ping to the default gateway and use that to determine if the interface is up. Now, that in and of itself, still not a great way to tell if the interface is actually working. A lot of times when you're dealing with an internet outage, the default gateway is just the next hop. It could just be your modem or just something right next to that device. Very often, if you have an internet outage, you can still hit the default gateway. So pinging it doesn't give us accurate information on this interface. So instead, what we want to do is add some specific targets. Now, what your targets are is really up to you, but I do recommend you have at least 2. And make sure that these are things that have good uptime. Don't ping some home server that you've got a NAT set up to that could randomly go down. So I like to pick things that I know are going to be available. So let's say I'm going to do a ping to 1.1.1, and then I also like to do things like a TCP lookup, and let's just say to Google. And then my other connection, I'm going to do the same thing, 2 targets, but I am going to make these different targets. So let's say this one, I'm just going to ping 8.8.8, and I'm going to pick a another website, and let's just say Amazon. My thinking here is that if both Google and Amazon are down, the world's having a really bad day, and so I'm probably just going to go home anyway. I figure at least one of these is going to be up, and that's the whole premise. The firewall just has to be able to hit one of them. So let's say that Amazon is down. As long as my firewall can hit 8.8.8, it knows that it can get out. Again, these targets are up to you. These are just general ones that we use, but we've definitely made exceptions or made specific settings depending on the organization. This box right here, require successful probe to all targets. That means that I would have to hit both of them. So they would both have to be up. I do not set that. I also want to pay attention to my probe interval down here. So this says that my firewall is going to send that probe, whether it's the ping or the TCP, every 5 seconds, deactivate after 3 consecutive failures, so 3 times 5, 15 seconds of outage, reactivate after 3 consecutive successes. So I've got a pretty short window before it's going to figure out that the interface is down, and then it's going to fail over or take the action that I have set in my multi-WAN. Failover is the default. And what this means is that I have a primary interface, fiber, I have set as my primary because it's top in the list. So all of my traffic is going to go out fiber. If fiber is down, we will fail over to cable. Now you have other multi-WAN options. We also can do round robin. With round robin, we are setting a weight on the interfaces that dictates how much one interface is used over the other. We have interface overflow. With this, we set a threshold on the interface. So we still have a primary and a secondary, but once we hit that threshold, we would fail over as well. And then we have routing table. Routing table, the firewall decides. It uses an algorithm called ECMP, equal cost multipath. It's looking at your routing table, trying to determine the best way to get the traffic to its destination. Failover is what we see most commonly. Primary interface, backup interface. Multi-WAN is your global setting. This is what the firewall will use unless you tell it differently. So how do we tell it differently? There can be a variety of reasons why you would want to have different settings on your device. But I'm going to use a simple example. We have a guest wireless network. So right now, because of my multi-WAN, all of my traffic is going out my fiber connection. If fiber is down, then it will fail over to cable. But it's my guest network. And I decide I don't want that traffic using up my primary bandwidth. I've got a secondary connection. Let's use that for guest. So this is where our SD-WAN starts to come in. SD-WAN stands for Software Defined WAN. There's several different ways the SD-WAN can be defined, but in this perspective, we're going to use it in a very basic capacity. So in my policy, I am going to select route outbound traffic using SD-WAN, and I'm going to create an action. Just call this guest. And here is where I get to specify what interfaces I want to include. So in this scenario, for my guest, I only want to send traffic out my cable connection. It's my backup line, use that for my guest network. I'm not going to select a failover. So what this means is that if my cable connection is down, my Wi-Fi is down for my guest network. For me, not a huge deal. So that's a very basic SD-WAN. And if I scroll over in my policy, I will see that listed here in my SD-WAN column. Now, more advanced, and honestly, the true reason for having SD-WAN is for performance. With multi-WAN, with me selecting failover, the only reason I will fail over to cable is if fiber is completely down. My link monitoring is not getting a response on either of my targets. But what if fiber is just acting poorly that day? This is where SD-WAN really starts to shine. We've all seen it. You have an internet connection that maybe is just going up and down all day, or you're seeing a lot of latency on it. This is where you can implement SD-WAN. So on my web traffic policies, I can say route traffic using SD-WAN, and I'm going to create another action. Because in my organization, web traffic is really important. We do a lot of stuff over the web, so I need to have good performance on the interface. So I'm going to first select the interfaces that I want included, but I'm going to flip this order. I want fiber to be my primary. So by doing this, I'm really not doing anything different than what my multi-WAN is doing. Fiber is my primary, cable is my backup. True SD-WAN allows me to implement metrics. These metrics are going to be what determines if that interface is performing correctly. So I can say if I have a certain amount of loss, latency, or jitter on my fiber interface, I'm going to fail it over to cable to see if I get a little bit better performance. Now, these metrics are generalized, so I might look at this and say, 5% loss rate, that's a lot. I'm going to drop that down to 3. Or 400 milliseconds of latency, that's a lot. I need a different parameter to run inside of. That's okay. You get to pick. Select or set up my SD-WAN action based off of the preference of interfaces, what I want my metrics to be, and attach that into my policies. You can use the same SD-WAN action in multiple policies. That's perfectly fine. So I have 2 web traffic policies, HTTP and HTTPS. There we go. Add my web traffic into each one. Can you add SD-WAN onto every single policy in your firewall? Yes. Are you really getting the benefit of true SD-WAN at that point? No. The metric setting for SD-WAN is really supposed to be for your high target, high priority traffic. Depending on the organization, that could be something different. So again, I can say for my organization, it's my web traffic. For another organization, you might have a policy written for a key line of business application. That application always has to be able to get out to the internet on good connections. I can write an SD-WAN action for that. You really get to decide what that looks like. If you have multi-WAN, please use this as a reminder to go in, double check your link monitoring settings. Again, 2 targets per interface. Make sure that they are targets that you feel are trustworthy. Please don't have them set to just point to your default gateway. Give each of them 2 targets, make them different between the two interfaces. Double check your multi-WAN. What function are you using? Are you using failover? Make sure you understand that. I harp on the link monitoring because I have seen it countless times. An interface will be seen as down on the firewall simply because link monitoring wasn't set correctly. And that just causes a whole lot of headache that can be easily remediated. So make sure you go in and check. And of course, if you need a second set of eyes, feel free to give us a call and we'll be happy to look at it with you. All right, upcoming training. So we do have a class coming up at the beginning of December. All of our classes we offer both in person and virtual. It's the exact same experience. The only difference with virtual is that you are, of course, not sitting and staring at the instructor, but you get all of the same content, same access. It's all built the same as if you are in person. So a Charlotte class coming up the beginning of December. We have a Seattle class in January. So if you want to go experience some not so cold weather at the beginning of the year, I'm just kidding. Seattle gets pretty cold. Charlotte class back in January, and then February and March. We are doing all of those in Charlotte. Of course, you can do our custom on-site training if you have multiple people in your organization that you need to get trained. We will come to you. We are happy to do that. So if you are interested in training, please reach out to your account manager. If you are not sure who your account manager is, please reach out to me and I will put you in touch with them. All right, we got a few minutes, so if you have any questions, please send those over and I will be happy to answer those. If you don't have any questions, thank you very much for attending this month. We really appreciate you all taking time out of your week to jump on these calls with us, but I'll give it just a moment to see if we have anyone with a question pop up. All right, not seeing anything come through, but if you ever have any questions, you can of course reach out to us. Reach out to me directly. I'm happy to route you to the person that can best answer your question if that does not happen to be me. Thank you all for attending. I hope you all have, we're getting into the holiday season. I myself am very excited about Thanksgiving, so I hope you all are able to stuff yourselves silly next week to the point that you start to seriously consider that end of the year diet. Thank you all for attending again. I hope you have a great afternoon, and we will see you next month.